presentation today will really examine the work that we are doing with the Volvedans Foundation within the conservation area. So, in a nutshell, my talk today will examine the Arid Eden project, which is a project by the Volvedans Foundation, and we are based in the south. And the Volvedans Foundation really came up with the Arid Eden Project Vision 20 in early 2019. And because it's not a secret that we are all at the precipice of civilizational collapse, where we are facing various complex challenges from inequality to biodiversity loss to food insecurity. And I think for us it was time to pause a little bit and to think about the future, because as we all know, it was quite evident during COVID-19 that the future will be prone to various complex challenges, of which COVID was just one of those. So Volvedans Foundation thought and paused a moment, and it was time for us to reinvent ourselves in a new will, to think about how best to create progress, connecting conservation and community. So the Arid Eden project is based on a matrix 25, which is based on consciousness, conservation, community, commerce, and culture. And today I'm going to focus a little bit on community based on the Rural Revive project, because if I had to really dissect and bisect all these matrices, then it will probably take a whole day. So Rural Revive in a nutshell, and when I joined the Volvedans Foundation a year ago, I was really fortunate to have been part of the project conceptualization. And so Volvedans came up with the project Rural Revive under its community, because of course, as we all know, conservation doesn't make sense without community. And because people are inherently part of nature, and therefore for us to conserve biodiversity and sort of to look at tourism, we must be able to come up with new paradigms that looked at how can we promote a balance between people and planet. So Rural Revive is based in a very small town called Maltaye. It's about 300 kilometers away from Windhoek. And just a small background, Maltaye is a community that has a lot of destitute conditions, where almost 70% of the people in Maltaye are unemployed. And previously, it used to be an economic hub. In the 1970s, when the caribou ship industry was thriving, Maltaye used to be an economic hub. But unfortunately, because of animal rights movements, so the industry collapsed completely. And of course, when you come to Maltaye, one fascinating thing that you see, besides the poverty and the inequalities, that there's these beautiful heritage buildings, as well as the culture is quite beautiful. But for us as Volvedans Foundation, we were intrigued by something, and that is one of the things that I'm going to speak about. So if you drive into Maltaye, you'll notice that it's one of those small towns where the dirt road ends and the gravel begins. So Maltaye is one of those towns where the tourists, whether they are local tourists or international tourists, will drive through, fill up, and disappear into the desert. Namib Ren, Sources Flay, and so forth. So there's not a lot of services in Maltaye. So one of the things that you see is a Cape Agra, a small service station, and tourists will fill up and disappear into the Namib Ren. And we thought perhaps where that dirt road ends and the gravel begin, as Volvedans Foundation, we can create what we call a desert-based economy, looking at how can we create a balance between people and nature, and of course, how can the community benefit from conservation areas and tourism establishments within the area. So for us, it was quite evident that we needed to create an infrastructure of opportunities, and similar to a person throwing a small rock into the river, it creates a ripple effect. So for us, Rural Revive is an infrastructure of opportunities that creates a ripple effect. And I'm going to speak a little bit about what we mean, what has been, the process, and what has been some of the successes. So of course, as you see, for us, it's about replicability. So it's not only about creating that blueprint, and that what we want to create is sort of a blueprint that we want to share with other similar towns on how to promote progress where people and nature are central to progress. Because of course, as you know, in the world for us, for a lot of people, progress is about economic growth, but that didn't bring us a lot of benefits because we all know it comes with distraction and so forth, unless we really find new paradigms where people and nature are central to that. So the objective of Rural Revive is about building a local-based economy, looking at the supply value chains around tourism and conservation, and looking at how best we can create opportunities for communities within that value chain. So there's 9 areas of engagement, and of course, as I dissect or as I move within the presentation, you'll notice that Rural Revive is expanding every day, and every time we are adding new work packages. So there's 9 areas of engagement. There's enterprise. So how do you take communal farmers that lives in multi-year and give them the basic fundamental skills of adding value to their produce? So there's horticulture. We are working with about 150 communal farmers and teaching them on how to grow food organically. There's education, of course, advocacy, and this is taking young citizens from multi-year and sort of giving them digital literacy workshops, resources. How do we rethink water use? How do we rethink the use of how do we rethink waste in multi-year, for instance, because waste is quite a problem. Basic healthcare. This is just one small clinic, and so we are thinking, how do we promote healthcare in multi-year? And then there's transport and logistics, there's culture and media ecology, and I'm going to tap into some of those, But in a nutshell, all of these are really governed by our philosophy, which is happiness for the planet and happiness for the people, which is also anchored into commerce, meaning that the foundation gets its money from our lodges. So levies goes to the foundation. Then this conservation is the kind of work we are doing in the Nami Brain Reserve. And then, of course, this community, Rural Revive, as a portion of that. We also have a training academy where over the last years, Volvedans has trained about 350 young Namibians in the hospitality industry. And then there's culture, so as much as there's an extinction of species, there's also an extinction of cultures around the world. So how do we recreate a new world where we think differently about culture and consciousness? So consciousness is one of the 5 C's that we've just added, because for us to convince and to sensitize, whether it's local communities, whether it's tourists or philanthropists that are driving through multi-year, they must be able to understand the importance of this new way of thinking as opposed to the conventional way of thinking. So, just quickly, our values. Rural Revive has a set of values that were created by a steering committee. And for us, Rural Revive is run by the community. It was quite clear at the onset that we needed to have trust and we needed to get the community to own Rural Revive. So we came up with a steering committee made up of a life skills teacher, a communal farmer, a commercial farmer, the daughter of the governor, an ex-pastor, an ex-librarian, and they guide and make the decisions. And we, as facilitators and of course as experts, would rather help them with implementation. So they, in a nutshell, drive the whole project, and for us is to really help with conceptualization and implementation. So these are some of our values. So Rural Revive is rooted in the community. It's connected, a lot globally. We speak about the Sustainable Development Goals, and we believe that Rural Revive is helping to localize those goals, which are of course interconnected. It's original, it's rewarding. So we speak about opportunities. What can every local person living in multi-year benefit? It's organic. The ideas are all from the community. It's changing, it's empowering, it's inclusive, it's transparent and sustainable. So, so when I meant, where the dirt road ends and the gravel begins. So, of course, that's where the dirt road ends, and beyond is where tourists will disappear to Sources Flay, Nami Brain, and so forth. So that's where we got our identity as Rural Revive. That's where we got our logo, for instance. As you can see, that's the dirt road. And for us, the analogy behind everything in that logo is that a lot of tourists will come from the city very linearly, thinking about themselves, relaxing at Sources Flay, and a lot of tourists, whether it's local or European. But beyond that, we wanted to create a new world where conservation meets the people, where there's a balance, and all those dots where there's, for instance, what we call a circular economy, and I'm gonna just talk about what I meant about that. So in a nutshell, that's still about our logo, and I don't want to go too much into that. I just want to get to the nitty-gritty of Rural Revive. So Rural Revive runs on 5 packages. One is the laundry service in Malta here, and I'm going to speak about that. And then we have a horticulture program and capacity building. And then we have a fresh produce hub in Malta here, a scheduled transport system, waste management and recycling. And of course, we had to identify what we call overarching packages. And these really help us to make the projects sustainable and realistic. So there's also economics, basis of a business. So I'm going to get to the laundry. So as I said, when you come to Malta here, you will see all these fascinating old buildings. And for us, it was quite clear that instead of rebuilding from the beginning, we saw an opportunity to maintain buildings and to turn them into something beautiful that will benefit the community. In the picture you see here, this is an old building, and we've just turned it into a laundry service that is being installed with 50 gigawatts of electricity, and attached to it is a recycling system. So what it means is, so hotels like Maltaia Hotel will bring their linen here, and the water is treated to a level that is sufficient to grow organic crops. And of course, currently the laundry is operational, and I'm going to show you some images. And at the start, we've employed 2 women, but the idea is that we employ 13 more employees. And the idea is that water is getting treated instead of lodges using water unsustainably in the desert where it's scarce. We are creating partnership where a lot of the lodges now have started bringing their linen to us. So we treat the water, and the water is reused for organic purposes. So the second part is horticulture, and I spoke a little bit about the gardens attached to it. So what we are doing is that we are supporting about 150 communal farmers within Malta here in order to grow food organically. So over the years, with the decline in the Karakul sheep industry, we've seen that there's an abundance of fertilizer, but the main challenge is that farmers do not have access to water. If you go in the south, you'll see a lot of windmills. So what Rural Revive has been doing was working with organizations like GIZ to replace those windmills, those boreholes run by windmills with solar energy to be able to pump water sufficiently. But not only helping them to access water, but also on how to grow food using very little resources, but to get a bigger margin. So this is just an example. Quite a lot of the work that we do in Malta here has been piloted at Volvedans. We have an eco village in the middle of the desert where we also have a horticulture school where youngsters from all walks of life in Namibia are brought together, and we teach them on how to grow food organically. And that whatever we pilot at Volvedans gets piloted in Malta and perhaps in many other communities. So this is an example of one of our nurses just before, in its initial stages. We've set up a nursery at the laundry, and the idea is that we are able to control the produce. So one of the biggest things is that we've set up a barn. So now we train farmers on how to grow food organically. We grow seedlings in the nursery. We provide them with seedlings because now we know what the lodges want, and the farmers are able to produce food that is in the market. So instead of Volvedans driving 600 kilometers away to procure food in Windhoek, they are able to buy food from the local farmers through the barn. And I'm going to show you a little bit of pictures later. So that's the barn. It's a central point connecting the local farmers to the lodges. Sauces Flay, Nami Brand. As we speak, Volvedans, Nami Brand Safaris are now procuring most of their produce from Malta here. And this is produce that has been grown by farmers organically. For us, it's very sad that local lodges within the desert would rather travel kilometers to Windhoek to buy tomatoes grown in Stanbridge, transported to Windhoek, packaged in plastic, and back to the lodges. That's clearly unsustainable when we speak about tourism. And I think the benefit here is not only in reducing their carbon footprint, but it's also how do you bring in that value in supporting communities, but also because the food is locally grown, it's organic, and you are helping to uplift communities. So that's the barn. It's connecting these local communities, farmers we've trained, and linking them to lodges within the surroundings. So that's the barn. It used to be previously a very old building, very dilapidated, and we've turned it into something beautiful. But I want you to pay attention to the surroundings, because this was at the very onset, and I'm going to show you how it looks like. So the central area where the barn is, where the laundry is, where the recycling plant is, we've recalled it as Rural Revive Campus, and because it's open to the community. For instance, we are also hosting movies with the kids. We had with magicians, where they had a show, and the theme was, of course, around biodiversity, and it's really open to philanthropists, for instance, and tourists. So what we started seeing is that all these tourists that used to fill up and disappear into the desert or have lunch at Maltaye Hotel have started asking questions now. So what is this Rural Revive Campus we are hearing about? And they've now started to have, self-guided tours at our campus, looking at the food that we are growing. And because it's quite key for Maltaye Hotel as well, as a beneficiary that, tourists are able to now see where their food comes from, or the angels behind their linen. And that's a new kind of tourism, because, as one of the speakers mentioned, people are no longer interested in coming and just checking in, going on a game drive. Is that we are seeing an emergence of philanthropists and people that really care about the planet, that wants to come in and see that the money that they give really goes to something that is helping to uplift communities. Because they also understand that we are now at a T-junction in the world, where everybody has to decide whether to go left or right. And right being the new way of doing things beyond business as usual. So, in Maltaye, that's also an old building. It used to be a pep store, also abandoned after the Caracol ship industry died. All services left. So we've procured this building, and we are now turning it into a future trading hub. This is going to be a place where tourists will come, have a coffee, listen to some traditional music, have farmers trading, and currently, as we speak, we use it for monthly open markets, where our farmers, we've given them an opportunity to come and to exchange and have conversation, but also exchange produce, jams, healthy food. So the desert runner. A lot of people will be asking, now how do you take the linen from lodges about 180 kilometers into the desert to Volvedans at the Rural Revive Campus? So we have what we call our desert runner. It's modified. That's what we use from Volvedans to Maltaye. There's a compartment for waste at the back. And the sides, we carry our linen on a weekly basis. So Volvedans, Namibia safaris, our linen comes to Maltaye, gets washed and back. But we are not saying that we are because we understand that every lodge has laundry ladies. But what we know for sure is that the laundry ladies will always be there, because there's emergency laundry for your guests. But we are speaking about the bulk. And it's also beneficial for lodges, because if you go in Namibia Reserve, we are very dependent on water from the underground aquifer. But we never know when that aquifer will run out. And it's quite key that we are able to treat that water. And if your guests hear that, your linen is being washed in Maltaye, where there's uplifting communities, and that water is being retreated to grow your organic food, that's something incredible for your lodges, and it really spikes the interest in your lodge. So this was just early pictures when we still got the guys from Volvedans, from the desert, to our Rural Revive Campus, and we are all getting ready to turn this dream into a reality. So, this is just one of those proposed routes. So in future, when the Desert Runner starts running and we have a lot of lodges interested, this is kind of the route that we are going to use. So currently, we have Maltaye Hotel, we have Sonop, we have all the Namibia Safari lodges, bringing their linen to Maltaye, and it's working perfectly. An interesting fact is that we've used women in Maltaye to come up with canvas bags. A lot of lodges, linen from the laundry back to the guests is in plastic. So what we want to do is to do away with plastic. So we've started to use canvas bags, where the inside material is made up of the Nama material, and we give an opportunity for local women to do that. And I'm going to show you pictures. Waste management, one thing when you come driving to Malta is the waste. There is no landfill, it's just a designated area where sadly at night some lodgers will dump their waste. We saw an opportunity to set up a recycling plan, and we have been in contact with Rented Drum and various other organizations, and the idea is that we are going to start collecting recyclables from the lodges. Well, we see waste as treasure. So instead of throwing it on landfill, we are collecting those recyclables and helping them to repurpose that, and through Rented Drum, we are able to give local communities an opportunity to employ themselves. Somebody will say, well, what if you run out of waste? And this is the kind of, this is the negative implications of these circular economies. But we've also identified that we are not only going to give them the opportunity to collect waste and bring it to the facility, but we're also going to empower them with the fundamentals of a business and farming, so they have at least a skill set to be able to thrive in future. So this was just us with Abram from Rented Drum. So this is not a landfill, it's just a designated area where people are throwing waste. And for us, we really want to get this, to change this. So this is just an example of the kind of things that Volve does, not within Malta yet, but where the lodges are. So this is our first pilot projects that I've been part of. So at Volve we are testing the waste recycling facility. But for us, we call it the gallery, because guests at Volve will often come and we give them what we call a heart and home tour. So at Volve there's a small eco-village where we all stay. But we also give the guests an opportunity to come and tour the place, going to the kitchen, meeting your chefs, meeting the gardener, going and looking at where your waste is being sorted. And for that, really creates that consciousness to be able to rethink differently about. So some of the things we've incorporated in the gallery is, of course, art pieces, and we had a lot of art residents, and this is the kind of facility that we want to put up in Malta here. So this is just to show you that a lot of the work in Malta here we've been piloting at Volvedans, about 180 kilometers away into the desert. So, for instance, these are some of the guests. So, unlike many other guests that comes to relax, we bring them on a heart and home tour. Come and see where your waste is, the bottles, what we've been doing with plastic bottles, what we've been doing with all this kind. So, for us, the waste facility is not a smelly place. For us, it's a gallery, There's art pieces, it's clean, it's tidy, and we give them an opportunity to really understand that around the world we're also consuming a lot of waste, and how can we think differently about it. So these are the kind of ideas that we're trying to incorporate, piloting them at Volvedans, but also expanding that into local towns like Malta. So back to Malta. Well, this Volvedans, but I want to get back to Malta. So the economics package is that we've been working with a group of men and women and giving them the fundamentals of a business. So what we've been doing is, so how do you do bookkeeping, how do you identify value, and the foundation gave them capital to start with that capital and to come up with ideas in their small town on how to attract tourists, but also how to increase that capital. So enterprise development is very linked to business, and I just want to get to the pictures because I think these are the boring stuff, and I often like to speak to the pictures very much. But before I get to impressions and the kind of pictures to show you the progress over 1 year, so in terms of relevance, Rural Revive, of course, ticks most of the sustainable development goals. But for us, of course, it's also climate change and CO mitigation, rethinking the food systems, reducing carbon footprints, getting, lodges to procure locally instead of driving kilometers away while emitting carbon. Wealth inequality, of course, Namibia is one of the second most unequal societies in the world, and unfortunately around the world about 1% owns much more wealth than the rest of the bottom majority. So how do we start to rethink these paradigms, but of course starting locally and within the context of Namibia and also within the context of tourism and conservation. In rural decline and the youth exodus. So we have a lot of young people in rural areas that are moving to cities because there's no opportunities. But what Rural Revive is doing is that we are creating an infrastructure of opportunities within a small town for young people to stay there, and of course not to move to the city. So you are giving them an opportunity to recreate progress within their community, but also to find and to reconnect to whatever surrounds their community. So the impact, of course, job creation and enhanced livelihoods, cleaner environment and CO mitigation, substantial water saving in the Namib Desert, skills transfer and capacity building, regional growth of the economy. Of course, we are about replicability. It's about what we do in Malta here will not stay there. So it's about how do we turn that into a blueprint that we are going to share with other towns. And of course, we have been doing this by working with local governors, local institutions. NAST is one of them. I see Ms. Jane Gold is here. And we've just started a new process to get, for instance, young development planners to be able to be part of Rural Revive. And of course, we are also extending to different other departments and sectors and universities because everything is interconnected. And for us, it's about taking a systems approach to progress. And on the horizon, of course, you know, we've started now with the horticulture, with the laundry, but we're also seeing education as we go. There's a lot of partnerships emerging. There's an old building that was just secured, and they want to turn it into an internet cafe. And the partnership will be, well, to teach young people on how to apply for jobs, but also, you know, giving media literacy workshops because the internet has a lot of content, but also how do young people circumnavigate around what content is beneficial for them. Resources, media ecology, and culture, and then impressions. So this, my favorite part, is about, well, I talked about what we did, but there's no pictures, so I think I'd like to get into the pictures. This is a set picture. Unfortunately, when we came in, these are some of the realities you see. It's animals in very destitute conditions. And for us, one thing that emerges is that how do we revive this? How do we turn this dead, sad town into something beautiful? And where do we start? How do we make animals as important as people, as the economy? And unfortunately, I should apologize for this picture, but sometimes as human beings, it takes sensitivity for us to realize the kind of world we are in. And that's why it's really up to each individual to play our own role in reshaping our future. So this is also one of those pictures when you come in and you see a lot of waste. But of course, these beautiful pictures. This was our first community meeting with the governor, with the local authority council, introducing Rural Revive. Because as external facilitators, it would have been unfair to come in and start a project without introducing it and without creating a form of ownership. Unfortunately, even within the community-based natural resource model and many other projects, we have seen white elephants, small parks in regions that are not being used. We have seen projects, campsites around Namibia, funded by EU within collaboration with MET, but they are dilapidated, they are broken down, and this is because there wasn't a continuation of capacity building to help the communities take ownership, but also to capacitate them to be able to run this initiative. And I think for us, with Rural Revive, that's why through the steering committee and all these initiatives is about how do we make local communities benefit in a way that is sustainable. So this was, of course, during COVID. This is the new campus, and so this is our Rural Revive campus where the laundry is, and unfortunately, and of course it never looked like this. We have offices, so in future when we have researchers coming to the south with these accommodation facilities, also where philanthropists would want to be part of the capacity building workshops with communal farmers and so forth, there is accommodation for that. This is the laundry. So this is our new laundry. At the moment, we have 2 laundry beautiful ladies that are doing the ironing. So 100% Malta Hotel. Linen is with us. Everything is done with our laundry. Volvedance now, Volvedance Foundation has different lodges in the desert. But on a weekly basis, their linen comes to us. We clean them and back to the desert through the desert runner. This was one of those, our early beginnings when we were setting up our nursery. And one thing is, in the south, it's very difficult to grow food. So what we've seen is that we grow organically by raising beds. So the beds is like you raise the beds, but you need to fill it up with organic content. Now this is where the opportunity comes in. When you go in Malta here and then you look at the Hudu